Okay, so I guess people are just starting to file in now.
Yeah.
So we'll give everyone a few more minutes. We're just 1 minute to 12 now, so we'll probably get started at just about 12:02 to give people a little bit more time.
Sounds great.
Thanks to everyone who's just joining. We're just going to wait another minute, maybe a minute and a half to let to just give a little bit more time for everyone to join here. Okay, I've got 12:02. So Alan, why don't we get started?
Sounds good to me. Your clock is fast, Jeff. I have 12. But let's fire away. People can join us as they do.
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks for everyone for joining. So today we're talking about pricing your home and how to sell for maximum value and really not leave money on the table, but make sure that you go to market with the correct list price. So maybe, Alan, what we should start with is just a couple of quick intros.
Yeah, let's do it. Fire away, Jeff.
So for those that haven't met me, I recognize a few names that had registered, but for those that haven't met me, I'm Jeff Jackson. I'm a founder with Bōde and the VP Sales. I have a real estate background, so I started in real estate back in 2007, about 14 years ago on the commercial side, and moved to residential shortly thereafter, and kind of grew disenchanted with the industry and really its lack of evolution, or at least lack of evolution in a way that benefited consumers. You know, I think the industry has really evolved a lot in the last 20 years, but all of that evolution has really stood to gain agents and not necessarily consumers. So I wanted to be part of a movement that allowed people, really empowered people to buy and sell real estate on their own if they chose to. So that's really the idea behind Bōde.
Awesome. And I'm Alan. I'm also one of the founders of Bōde, like Jeff. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here. My background's not in real estate. It's much more in tech. And before my tech experience, I also spent a long time as a strategy consultant, helping companies with their pricing. So I've spent a lot of years thinking about pricing and come at it from a slightly different angle from Jeff. So that's why you've got us both here. But we're super excited to share some of our thoughts with you today, and we're going to go through an example a little bit later on. Anything more you want to say about the agenda, Jeff, before we jump in?
The only thing to add would just be that we do have, there should be a chat function, and we do have that monitored. Thanks, Jenny, for helping out today. So any questions that pop up, please don't hesitate at any time. And then, of course, we will leave time at the end as well to answer any specific questions.
Yeah, perfect. But do feel free to get your questions in as we go, and where possible, we'll try and answer them as we go, but we'll also leave some time at the end for Q&A. Great. So yeah, I'm going to start us off. And the first thing is about why it's really important to have an accurate list price. So there's an amazing statistic that I think most people don't know about, and that is that 50% of homes listed on realtor.ca fail to sell. So about half of all of the people who list their homes for sale fail to sell their homes. I think most people think that the vast majority of people, when they're trying to sell their home, do, and that's simply not the case. And the big reason for that, the number one reason why someone would fail to sell their home, is that they simply overprice it. They start off with a list price that's too high, and then they don't ever drop it down from there. So because of that, it's really important that you try and start with an accurate list price. So on the next slide, we show you what tends to happen when people don't do that. They start with a high list price, and you can see exactly why people want to do this, right? They think they want to try and start high, and that'll help them attract a high offer. Or they think to themselves, maybe if I start high, we'll meet in the middle somewhere, and we'll end up closer to my home's real market value. But this little chart here tries to explain why that's actually a bad strategy. So if you start off there at the number 1 on the chart, start off pricing your home at a high price, you'll go onto the market and you'll generally sit there and you won't have a lot of activity, you won't have a lot of showing requests, and no offers come in. So you sit and wait. And while you're waiting, your overpriced home is actually helping to sell more competitively priced property all around you in your local neighborhood. Because what buyers are doing is they're comparing your home to all the other homes that they could buy, around you or nearby. They're looking at the whole market and seeing what looks like good value for money. So while you're overpriced, you're actually helping your neighbors to sell their homes. So you sit and wait, and eventually you make some small price reductions, but they don't do anything, you don't get enough traction, and you repeat this process until eventually you get to the point where you're at market value. And that's where you see the numbers 5 and 6 there on the chart. But even now, even though you're at market value, you'll often find now that you still won't get an offer. And the reason is because one of the first things buyers ask when they come to view your home is, how long has it been on the market? And if it's been on the market a long time, that makes buyers a little bit nervous that, why hasn't anyone else made an offer? Why hasn't it moved? So in the end, you end up having to reduce your price a little bit further still below market, and you actually end up selling for less than you could have had you just started off at the right price to begin with. You wouldn't believe the number of people that end up going through this process. And it's, like I said earlier, you can see why they think that this is the way to go. You want to start high in order to sell somewhere in between what you want and what the buyer wants. But a much better strategy is to start off with a list price that's as close as possible as you can to market value, what your home is actually worth. And on the next slide, show you why this is the case. And another surprising statistic here is that if you look across all of the transactions that happen every year in Alberta, the number always works out to be the same here, which is that the average sold price is 97% of the average list price. So what that tells you is, on average, right, buyers are negotiating a 3% discount off the list price. And the reality is most buyers just won't make a lowball offer, and they get discouraged from doing that. If they're working with a realtor, they're discouraged. Their realtor will discourage them from making a low offer. If they're not working with a realtor, they might just culturally feel like it would be insulting to offer you a price that's significantly lower than your list price. So oftentimes sellers will wonder, well, why is no one making me an offer? Like, I get that I'm priced probably a little bit too high, but why doesn't someone just make me a lowball offer? And the reality is that most buyers just won't do it. So that's, again, another big reason why it's so important to come on at about the right price, about market value for your home. So that's a bit of an introduction on why it's so important. Anything to add there, Jeff?
Just that we saw an example of that just last week. We had a seller in Riverbend who listed his home for $550, and he bought, I think, in 2014. So he bought at a pretty high point of the market and was trying to recoup as much as possible. He understood that the value is probably closer to about 500, and he reduced from 549 to, I think, 529, and then got an offer at, I think, 505. And he made this exact statement. He said, well, why didn't someone just offer me 505? When I was listed at 549. And I don't know if it's the case all around the world, but I do think in Alberta, we have a bit of a polite society when it comes to negotiating. And most people have a bias to not make an offer, 10% under the list price. So if you are out that 10%, if you're out 3, 4, 5%, it's one thing. But if you're off 10, you're really going to discourage people from making offers and even really viewing a home.
Yeah, spot on. So next, actually, I just want to talk about. Oh, sorry, fire away, Jeff.
And no, you go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, next up, we're just going to cover some of the major factors that for people to keep in mind when they're pricing their home. So on this slide, when you think about it, what someone's willing to pay for your home is, it's determined entirely by the buyer. So what your house is worth today is determined by what a buyer is willing to pay for it. And what a buyer is willing to pay for it depends on what they are looking at in terms of other homes that are for sale right now. So what else is on the market? They're comparing your home to all of the other similar homes that they could buy instead. And they're comparing it to other similar homes that have recently sold, right? So if you've got, a similar home on your street that recently sold for $550, they're taking that into account when they're looking at your home as well. So effectively, what determines your home's value is what buyers deem it to be worth when they're doing this big comparison shopping exercise. It really is that simple. And if you think about the last time you were buying a home, this is most likely what the same process you went through, right? You took a look at all the homes that were available on the market when you were looking to buy, and you decided, okay, of those options, which ones were the best value for money for you, given your preferences. So oftentimes I think it's very easy for sellers to get a little bit of tunnel vision and really just think about their own property and why its value is higher than maybe it is. And they don't think about all of the other options that a buyer currently has that are on the market right now as well, and how their home compares to those other ones that are on the market. So I think it's a really important exercise that when you are looking to set your list price, you take a look at what is on the market right now and how that compares to yours. And that's going to change over time. So, you're going to do that the first time when you set your list price, but then once you're listed, a few weeks in, there's going to be more homes available on the market, and you've got to take a look again and think, okay, compared to these other options that buyers are looking at, how does my home compare? Is my home good value for money versus the others or not? So it's an exercise I think you have to repeat while you're listed. And then on the next slide, we just talk about what some of the biggest factors are that determine your home's value. So obviously, the first few here are going to be pretty obvious to people. Location is the big one, where your home is situated, and then what's available in that neighborhood in terms of schools and facilities. The next one is type and style. So that's type would be whether it's a detached home, whether it's an attached home, or whether it's an apartment. And style would be, whether it's a bungalow, a two-story, etc. So location, type and style, and then size. So obviously the bigger sizes are going to be much more valuable to buyers. Then the next couple of things really don't determine value as much as they have an impact on the saleability of your home. So obviously, the better condition your home is in, the more attractive it's going to be to buyers, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to command a much higher price for it. It's when a buyer is comparing your home to another home, it's going to have the effect of they're going to feel like, oh, well, that one's in really good condition, so I have a bit more of a preference for that one, but not necessarily that they're going to pay a huge amount extra for it. Anything else to add to that, Jeff?
Yeah, no, I think you described it perfectly. Like, I think of on the very top of location, that's why apartments in Tribeca, New York sell for $2,000 a square foot, and apartments here sell for $400 a square foot. Location is definitely the biggest factor. When I think about amenities, these are things that often sellers will think, oh, well, there's great value in this, but it's something like heated tile in the master ensuite. It's lovely. I love heated tile, but is it really going to change the value of the home? Probably not. It could persuade a buyer to select your home over another one.
Yeah. Perfect.
So this is I'll take over here, Alan. So the different opinions of value, what we've talked about and what Alan has walked us through is really determining market value. And then, of course, we have the seller's opinion of value, which is often higher, and that's a normal bias, which I'll talk about in a moment. The appraiser, who actually probably has the best indication of what market value is. So an appraiser is different from a real estate agent. An appraiser is someone who is actually trained and licensed in providing property appraisals. So real estate agents do have some experience and some training in this, but an appraiser, this is exactly what they do. So what an agent might do is say, well, your home is worth between $450,000 and $480,000. The difference with an appraisal is that an appraiser will give you an exact number. So that appraiser will come in, look at the data, and say, based on this, the value of this home is $475,000. And then, of course, the bias on the buyer, who always wants to pay as little as possible, is to have a lower value. The one I want to talk about is the one at the top, though. So the seller's opinion of the value of their home. I think it's easy to forget that there's a natural bias to believe that your home is worth more than what it is. And that bias exists because you bought the home. At some point, you purchased the home. And what that means is that you valued that home more than anyone else in the market. So it's only natural that when you go to sell, you're still going to see more value in that home than maybe the market will.
Maybe just really quickly to mention there, Jeff, that it's pretty uncommon for sellers to get an appraisal of their home before they list. But we've had some examples of it recently of some of our customers who've done that. And I think it's a great idea. Next time I go to sell a home, I'll certainly get the opinion of an appraiser. It's normally quite good value. It's, in the region of $300 to $400. And I personally think it's a great idea for people out there who want a bit more confidence that they're setting a great list price to begin with. And then it's also a great document to have that, you can share with the buyer during negotiation to say, well, here's a third party appraisal of the home, and they said it was worth this much. So yeah, for people out there who are feeling like they'd like a little bit more confidence in that, an appraisal is a great option. And we actually have some appraisers in our Pro Marketplace. So if you go to the Pro Marketplace section of our website, you'll find a selection of appraisers in your local area that can help you with that service.
Yeah, I love that idea. And I think that the point you made about it being third party is really important because, when you have agents involved in a deal, they have a natural bias, whereas the appraiser really doesn't. If the home sells or doesn't sell, the appraiser still just earns the $250 or $300 fee. They're not biased by the $10,000 commission that they could earn. So the fact that it's third party is really important, and it creates a level playing field. As soon as you enter negotiations, you can say, well, we have access to all the data. We can look at the comparables, but in advance of negotiating, you could say, here's a third party independent appraisal report that was just completed in the last 6 weeks. And, I'd like to present this to you to begin our conversation. So pricing a home is not perfect science. I think that based on the methodologies and the theory that Alan has taken us through, if we all knew the exact market value of our home, I think more of us would be inclined to actually go forward and list at that price. But it's not a perfect science, and what we like to do is kind of triangulate a number of different methodologies to arrive at a list price. So that's what we're going to go through today. Please excuse me in advance. I'm going to be jumping around to a bunch of different screens, but the three and these are not exhaustive, there are other data sets, but the three that I want to look at today is the home price index, which is something that is published by the Canadian Real Estate Association, and then recently sold listings and active listings, which really makes up your current competition. So I'll show you on our website how you can access information on both recently sold and active listings. And as mentioned, you really want to triangulate these data points to determine your home's value. Of course, like I said, there's other data that you can look at. You can order an appraisal. You can look at your tax assessed value from your city or municipality. But these are the three I'd like to focus on today. So the first one is the Canadian Real Estate Association Home Price Index. This is This tool is not very well understood, I would say, but it's actually a very simple tool. So for 65 local markets across Canada, what the Canadian Real Estate Association did is say, okay, starting in January of 2005, every single market is assigned a score or an index of 100. So we now have, 16 years of data here. And what it does is it takes a benchmark home, which they consider a typical home. So in Calgary, it might be a 2-story, 1,800 square foot home with 3 bedrooms up and a finished basement, something along those lines. And then they say, based on this benchmark home, the reason they use a benchmark and not average is because averages can really be skewed by low sales and high sales by kind of outliers. So the benchmark creates a more reliable index. So what they do is they assigned every market 100, and you can download this. It's totally free. It's available to the public. Simply Google Korea HPI, and you just agree to their terms. You can download 2 sets of data. One is seasonally adjusted, and one is non-seasonally adjusted. They don't vary that much, so I encourage you just to use the non-seasonally adjusted data. Along the bottom of the spreadsheet, you'll see the markets. So I think it starts with Vancouver. Make sure you're on the right market when you use this tool, because otherwise you'll be using numbers that simply don't make sense.
I'll also just quickly jump in there, Jeff, to say you can also find the HPI index on our site, and Jenny will put it into the Q&A. Put a link to it in our Q&A. It comes out every month in our monthly market reports. So it breaks it down for each city and for each property type, if you'd like to take a look at it there as well.
Yeah, and that's something I failed to mention too, was that it does break it down by property type. So you can look at 1-story, 2-story townhouses and apartments all along the top of the spreadsheet. So this was just a quick example. And like I said, we always use multiple data sources. I would never go forward with just one, but I was super curious before we hosted this webinar last time. This is a home that I owned in Calgary that I bought in May 2011 and sold in March of 2020. And as you can see, the photography got a lot better over that time, but I was just curious to know how the HPI might have held up. So I look back at what the HPI index was in the spring of 2011. It was for single story or bungalow type product, it was 165.8. And when I sold, it was 187.6. So that was an increase of about 22%, which would indicate that the value based on Korea HPI would have gone from about 610 to 710,000. Ultimately, I sold this home for 740. So again, not perfect, but within 5% of what the value of the home was when it sold. So the next tool is something called the CMA, and this is where you'll see bus benches. Call for your free CMA. This is the thing that agents provide to anyone that's interested in listing their home. It's usually part of the listing presentation, and it stands for a comparative market analysis. So this process is a method of property valuation that is used to estimate a range of values. As mentioned, an appraisal report will give you a single digit, whereas this CMA will give you a range of values. And it's used to help sellers set a listing price for their property. What it does is compare recently sold homes to the subject property. So using that same example, if we were looking at a typical home in the suburbs of Calgary, we'll say a 2-story built in 2005 Evanston home, what you would do is look at all other homes in the area and compare them. So if the typical home had a 2-car garage, you'd ideally like to compare it to homes that have 2-car garages. If you came across a comparable that had a 3-car garage, you would deem that feature to be superior to the subject property and make an adjustment on the CMA. So maybe we would value that third bay at an extra $10,000. The other really common one would be the finished basement. So it's not ideal to compare homes with finished basements to homes with unfinished basements, but you simply make an adjustment for it. So if your home has an unfinished basement and you'd like to compare it to a home that has a finished basement, you would typically say, between $20,000 and $25,000 worth of value for the inferior property or for the superior property. So we give all of our users access to market data, sold data, and comparables, all for free on our website. This information per provincial standards or provincial regulations is gated, so you do need an account to access it. But as soon as you have an account, you can access this data. And I'll just jump out of here and into a new tab to show you exactly where that is. So if we go in here, you can see the top navigation here is sold data. And here you can look at market data, sold data, and comparables. So to start with market data, this allows you to drill down to your community level and your property type. So we are operational in BC. So the first step is to select your province. Next is to select your city. We don't want to look at Calahoo, we'll look at Calgary instead. Calgary. And we're just going to look back 1 year. Now, you can look at the data here, or if you want to drill down and get into more filters that are optional, you can do that here as well. So let's say we're just going to look at detached homes in the community of Altadore. So once we have that in, we can apply the filters. And now you can see that this graph is being generated, and you can see what has happened in Altadore over the past year. So you can almost see a little bit of seasonality here. You know, there's a bit of seasonality in September every year, and then of course March, April, May. In general, if we go back over a longer time horizon, you'll see the trend more clearly. You can also choose the chart type. You can see the number of sales and the days on market. So if you want to see the days on market over the past 6 months, I would expect this to be a pretty low number in Altadore currently. So yeah, you know, 35, 32 days on market, those are really low, especially when you consider that those numbers will typically include the buyer's due diligence period. So that will include the time that the buyers need for a property inspection or financing approval, which typically would be about 7 to 10 days. So what this tells me is that, you know, most homes in Altadore in April, May, we're getting an offer within about 3 weeks of going to market.
Yes, that's a really great way of using that tool there, Jeff. Is, you know, if you've been on the market now for some time, say 6 weeks, and you're wondering, well, what's typical for your community? This is a great place you can come in and find out, you know, for detached homes in your neighborhood, how long do they typically spend on the market? And if you've been on for longer, it's a pretty good sign that you're likely overpriced.
Yeah, what I love about this tool is that it actually lets you drill down to a community level. You know, when you listen to national news or BNN, or any international news, they always talk about the Canadian real estate market. There is no such thing as a Canadian real estate market. What's happening and what has happened in the last 5 years in Toronto and Vancouver is so different from what's happening in Prince Edward Island and Alberta. And our market, even drilling down further, Calgary performs very different to Edmonton. You know, I think that we're at the mercy of energy cycles a little bit more because there's more public service in Edmonton, and it tends to kind of buffer the extremes more than we do here in Calgary. So the next tool that I'll introduce you to is sold data. So here it varies a little bit by market, but in Alberta we have about 11 years of sold data. So here, there's really 2 options for searching sold data. You can search by individual address. So using that same example that we had, the home that I'd sold recently, I can simply type in an address, and here I can see the location and 2 sales. So again, exactly what we had seen before. We saw that the home sold once in March of 2011 for $610,000, and again in March 2020 for $740,000. If you aren't looking for a specific property, you can also search using the second section here, and we'll do the same for that same community, Calgary and Altadore, over the last, say, 6 months. And now what the map is going to do is chart all of the homes in Altadore that have sold in the last 6 months. So we can see this one sold for 100% of the list price at 2.465. There's some very high-end homes I seem to be randomly clicking on here for Altador, but we give you the lead image, and then of course, if you do want any more details, simply reach out to our team, and we'll send more details on it. So the very last tool is kind of the brainchild of Alan, which is pretty cool. If you think about when an agent comes into your home to provide you with a comparative market analysis, the homes that they show you may be perfect comparables, but sometimes because an agent's typical incentive is to sell a home quickly, they may show you homes that are listed lower than the comparables that are higher priced. Now, what this tool does is take any guesswork out of that process. So here, I won't actually go through it, but if you tell us that you own a detached home, that's a two-story home that was built in 2005 with 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and 2,400 square feet and a double garage, we will then provide you with the exact comparables for your home based on a special algorithm that Alan created. So we will show you not only comparables of sold homes, but also comparables for the active competition. So again, those two things that you really want to triangulate for your home value: what else is on the market that buyers have access to, and what has sold recently. And as Alan, we were just chatting about that process, and I mean, you just went through this in the last week. Even when you determined the home that you wanted to buy, what was your process? Because I know it's the same for a lot of buyers, having worked with buyers for 12 years. Even when you've decided, okay, this is the home I'd like to purchase, you still go through that process of what else is on the market for that price and in that area. And typically you want to see them, right? You want to get out and see, okay, what if I have determined that I want to buy a 2-story home in Evanston and I'm going to pay $450,000, the last step to really give me peace of mind is to go look at all $450,000 homes in Evanston to make sure that I am making the right decision.
Yeah, absolutely. We went through this ourselves just in the last few weeks, and we ended up looking at a huge number of homes in a way just to give us more confidence that the home we're buying is actually good value for money relative to the other homes that are available in that area. And now the deal's firm and it's done, and I still find myself continuously checking to see what's coming up in that area, right? Making sure that giving myself confidence still that I'm happy I bought the home I did at the price I did. Yeah, so I think it's a really important exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of the data tools. Before I navigate back to our presentation, I just want to show everyone how easy it is to list your home. So when you come to this page, all that you do is enter your address, hit get started, and we walk you through a listing process. Most people get through this process in about 10 to 15 minutes. Of course, we make it a lot easier for our users as well by providing a lot of information prior to this step. So if you start listing, we're going to send you a few things. This will be an example of one document that we'll send you. So this is a map report generated by the City of Calgary through Pillar 9. And so we randomly selected one address today for someone on the call who's started listing or has an interest in listing their property. And the address was 19 New Brighton Drive. So this is a home down in New Brighton. What I'll do is show you exactly what this report shows you. So you can see some of the legal information, the tax assessed values over time. So going all the way back to 2012, what the tax assessed values have been. You can see MLS history. So we can see that this home sold back in 2004 for $226, and then any permits would show up here as well. So we can see that there's no permits here, but if you pull the city permit to do a new deck or a basement development or an extension, that information would show here, and it would also show a value of the construction. So if you remodeled your kitchen and had a permit for that work, maybe the permit value would be $20,000.
Just going to jump in here, Jeff, to ask you a quick question that we've had.
Of course.
And that is, we've had a question of how good of an indicator of value is your tax assessment, and how serious should you take those values?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it comes up often. I would say, again, I would use it as a point of triangulation, but I would never use tax assessed value as the sole means by which to price your property. Um, some years we find that tax assessed values are pretty bang on. Other years they trend always lower, other years always higher. Sometimes I find that the tax assessed values for suburbia might be okay, but downtown really is, miles off. And the one example I use, there was a home in Upper Mount Royal on Hillcrest Avenue that I saw a few years ago sell for $1 million less than the tax assessed value. So you think about being that seller, how much additional taxes you had paid based on the value, and really the value was, in this example, it wasn't a $10 million home. It was a $2.5 million assessment on a $1.5 million sale. So again, use that as a data point, but not as your only data point. So the other thing that we send all of our users when they start listing their property with us is any MLS history that you may have. So as you're going through that process, what we've heard from our users is that this document makes it very easy to just refer to. So here, if you're unsure of, if your construction is insulated concrete form or brick or wood frame, you can simply refer to it here. If you're not totally sure that your roof type is asphalt shingles, which in Alberta would be 98% of properties, if you just want to double check, you can also refer to the past MLS sheet that we have on file. And then of course it's fun to look at what the home looked like back when you purchased it. In this case, that was 15 years ago, and it wasn't uncommon to only have 4 photos on an MLS listing. So we provide that information as well. So yeah, we've gone through the access to data, and we're just in this case study now on this New Brighton home. So what I've done in advance is, let's see. Don't seem to be here right now, so just give me one moment, I'll bring that up. What we want to do is look at a set of sales comparables that for this property. So as part of our process, you do have self-service access to all of the active competition and sold comparables going back 11 years on our website. But what we do just as part of the process when you start listing your property with us is we will send you a link that looks like this. And what this is typically a 1 to 2 kilometer radius around the subject property. So the subject property in this case is, I believe, located right here by my cursor on New Brighton Drive. And we will look at not knowing exactly if the subject property is built in 2004. We'll typically go 3 to 4 years older and 3 to 4 years newer. We'll look at the same property type. So in this case, detached homes with a double attached garage and about the same square footage. So, it might be 10% more and 10% less to really capture a fair assessment of the market. And what's nice about this is that whether you're dealing with a represented buyer or a buyer that's unrepresented, you have full transparency and full access to all of the sales comparables that you might need. So in this case, the really unique thing about this property is that it is on a bit of a busy road. So New Brighton Drive is a collector for the community, and the first step you'd want to do is, if possible, I think the address was 19 New Brighton Drive. So the first comparable here we can see is actually the next door neighbor. This just happened to work out for us this time. It looks like it has sold in the last year. We did go back 12 months on this search. So we can see that this home sold for $536,500. And from this link, it's very easy to jump into the photos. And now what you're actually doing here is doing your own comparative market analysis. You can now flip through and say, okay, it looks like for this home to be built in 2001, it definitely has a new kitchen. It definitely has new flooring and countertops. And you can make an assessment of how this home compares to your subject property. That's a spice drawer. I'd love something like that.
Wow.
Look at that. And
I like it.
the Japanese knife collection. That's impressive. I quite
Yeah.
like this one. So yeah, you've got that one. Now, that again is just one more data point for you to determine your market value on. Looking along that same road, that was 15 New Brighton Drive. There are some other sales on New Brighton Drive. So maybe we want to start here. Here's a few more. It looks like 92 New Brighton Drive, 2005 home that sold for 420. Again, same process. We're going to go through. We're going to compare it in terms of photos, in terms of features. So this one is definitely more original. You know, as soon as you see that oak trim, you know that it hasn't had upgrades, because baseboards and casings are typically one of the first things that gets updated. But, you know, still a nice home in good condition. So there's another kind of data point where you can determine the value of your home. And really that is essentially what any agent is going to do as part of this process. So with that, just to summarize really quickly, you know, as Alan mentioned early in the presentation, overpricing is the main reasons for homes not selling, or at least not selling for what they're worth. And your buyer is really worth what your home is really worth what a buyer is willing to pay for it. The buyers do determine market value in this circumstance. And finally, the three data sources, not exhaustive. You can use an appraisal, you can use the city or municipality tax assessment, but the other three data sources that you might consider are the HPI index, active competition, and recently sold listings. And you know, we have all of this information at your disposal with an account on our website. So we really give you everything you need to set the perfect list price. And of course, if you do want to reach out and dive into the data a little bit further, we're happy to walk you through that process. And I believe Jenny's going to send out a couple of things after the presentation. One will be a link to my calendar so that anyone who visited today can book, I believe, a 15-minute or 30-minute session with me to kind of look at the data in detail. And the other thing will be our ultimate guide to pricing your home. So basically, it gets into a little bit more detail than we did today, but it's an ebook to help guide you through this process. So with that, I'd love to just stop sharing my screen and open it up to any questions we may have.
Great. Looks like we've got a lot of questions here, Jeff, so we'll spend some time on those. So first one, it looks like it's from someone who's listed with us at the moment. Their question is, there's a 90-day listing period with Bōde, and I was wondering if you could help me with what happens after that. So is it better to take it off the market at that point and relist at a lower, more accurate appraised value? Or is it better to leave it on the market and simply reduce the price?
Yeah, so coming off market doesn't really benefit you in any way. Basically, what you're looking for is you want any buyers that are set up on save searches, whether they're set up on their own save searches on Bōde or set up on their own save searches on realtor.ca, or they may be set up on a saved search with their agent. What you want to happen is for that user to get notification of the price reduction. And that's what happens when you reduce the price. So there's really no advantage to coming off and coming back on. All of the buyers that have a search in place will still get a notification email stating that the home has been reduced in value. But on that point, the reason why it's so important to price accurately first, in my opinion, and having worked with agents or with buyers over the last 12 years, is that it's really hard to get a buyer to come back. If a buyer has visited your property and determined for any reason that it's not of interest, a $20,000 price reduction might make it interesting again. But I would say typically, as soon as a buyer has determined that that home is not of interest, it's really hard to bring them back, even with a 3 to 5% price reduction.
Yeah, I think oftentimes people think, well, maybe if I come off the market for a while and then go back on, nobody will know that I was listed before, right? And they might think, oh, this is a new listing. and it hasn't been on the market for very long. And that's generally not the case. Most people will be able to figure out that you were previously listed for 90 days, and you came off for 20 days, and now you're back on. So generally, everybody will have access to that information. So you're not kind of fooling anyone, as it were, by taking that approach. So normally, I suppose, better to stay on market, and as soon as you can, try and get to the right price. So another question here for you, Jeff. It's from someone who lives in Okotoks, and they're asking if they can also use that same Korea HPI index for Okotoks, or is it only done at kind of a bigger city level?
Yeah, so the HPI covers 65 markets across Canada. Okotoks won't be one of them, but Calgary would be a really, really close proxy to the values of what has happened in Okotoks. So choose your nearest center, and it should provide some good data.
Great. Another question for you here. It's from someone who's looking to sell their property, but they say they have a tenant with a lease currently until December 1st, and how that would impact a potential sale of their property. And their concern here is that they're not going to be able to sell with a tenant in place.
Yeah, great question. So this all comes down to the Residential Tenancies Act of Alberta. You can't break a lease to sell your home, is the general answer. But there's two types of lease. One will be a fixed term, and one will be month to month. It sounds like the user in this case is on a fixed term lease until December. So there are a few kind of loopholes about terminating a fixed term lease, but in general, you can't terminate until the lease agreement is up. So your options in that case are to incentivize the tenant to leave, incentivize the tenant to be accommodating of showings. I've heard some landlords will say, I'll give you your last month of rent free in my home, and I'll pay for your first month in your new home. If you are cooperative with showings, you keep the home tidy, and you're willing to break this lease early. The other type of lease agreement is month to month, and that's called a periodic tenancy agreement. And for those ones, you will typically need to provide 90 days notice. So again, work with your tenants, because most buyers don't want to wait 90 days. The most typical possession, like time between condition removal and closings we're seeing, is more like 30 to 45 days. So you do potentially steer buyers away from your property by insisting that possession be 3 months out. So the best kind of practice here is to work with your tenant.
Great. We got another question here for you, Jeff. So it's again from another person who's listed with Bōde. So they're saying, my house was initially high when I listed it by $60,000. It's been on the market for 6 weeks now, and I've just reduced it, I'm assuming, by $60,000. And it's been at the lower price for 1 week. So I suppose the question is, what should they expect from here?
Yeah, what I like to do when you do come back to market, if you can freshen the listing in any way. I know we had an Edmonton listing sell recently, and the photos still had snow on the ground. And I know that user actually did go through price reductions. So if you are going to do a price reduction, we're happy to work with our sellers. And if the seasons have changed, anything like that, what you really want to do is make that listing look new again. And if photos is a way of doing that, even if it's just new exterior photos, if the backyard looks better, it's worth that incremental cost to freshen the listing. And typically what we do as well is when we see price reductions come through, we do increase our ad spend. So we're advertising freshly reduced priced homes with more advertising dollars.
Yeah, I'm gonna add on to this questioner's question and ask, because maybe one thing they were trying to get at here is, now that they've lowered their price, how many weeks will it take for them to kind of figure out if they've lowered it enough or not? Like, should they expect traction pretty quickly after they lower their price, or can it take a bit longer?
Yeah, typically it should happen quite quickly. As a general rule, we kind of say that if you're 10% off or more, you'll get no showings, right? If you're priced 10% or more high, you won't get showings. If you're getting, showings but no offers, then you're probably in that 5% range. And I do think that looking at it on a percentage basis is more effective than looking at it on a price basis. I think it's really hard as a seller, and we're all prone to this. It's really hard to say, well, I'm going to reduce the price $25,000, but if you are 10% overpriced, that might indicate that you actually have to reduce further than 25,000. So those price reductions, typically, if you're in the market, you'll see activity right away if you've reached where the market is.
And for all the people who are with us on this webinar who aren't currently listed with Bōde, one thing that we send out that should be really helpful for you is every 2 weeks after you're listed with us, we'll send you an email that'll show how many showing requests you should have expected by now. So if you've been listed for 2 weeks, then typically you should have X many showing requests. And if you've been listed for 4 weeks, well, now you should have Y. So that's another really good way that you can tell when you're listed with us how your listing's doing, how it's performing. Jeff, another question for you here. When it comes to improving the condition of your home, should you repaint your house to a neutral color before listing?
Yeah, I would say yes, absolutely. It's the one thing that you can do where you're very likely to get 100 cents on the dollar back on your return on investment, especially if you're doing that work yourself. We have painters in the pro marketplace. They're excellent. Anyone has access to those professionals. But if you're willing to spend a weekend and paint, let me know. I'll give you all the Benjamin Moore codes 00C41. I've used like cloud cover and gray mist 1,000 times, but find a gray, a white that's a touch gray, paint your house with that, with white trim. And I think it's the easiest and most inexpensive thing you can do. Everything else gets really expensive, and you don't know if a buyer is really going to like your selection of granite, right? They might walk in and say, well, I don't want to pay for that because I just need to change it out anyway. So things like that, the decision as to whether or not to upgrade, those are difficult decisions. But paint is not a difficult decision. For the cost of a few gallons and rollers, I'd say paint your house in a neutral white.
Great. Another question for you here. The questioner says, I'm selling a condo. Should I gather the related condo docs now or once I have an offer? And is it okay if the condo docs are a few months old?
Yeah, great question. So if you're selling a house, the thing you absolutely need or you need to start preparing when you list your property is the real property report, which is a survey of your property on the land that you own. When you're selling a condo, the thing that you absolutely need to start preparing, because I don't know if it'd be rare if any offers will come that are not subject to a review of the condo documents. So you want to start preparing those. You can get them one of two ways. You can talk to your property management company. They will sell them to you, often for they can get quite expensive. It's a set of about 25 documents for those that don't know. It includes things like the meeting minutes for the AGM, monthly board meeting minutes, insurance certificates, financials, budgets, and I think one of the most important documents, which is the reserve fund study. So when you buy a condo, you're not just buying the unit, but you're buying your unit and then shares in the corporation. And that corporation is going to manage things like replacement of the roof in 25 years and sweeping the parquet and all of those things. So you want to make sure that the upcoming common expenses are budgeted for. You can wait until you have an offer to purchase all those documents. I understand people don't want to incur that cost. Try to gather as much as you can at time of listing, because if you do need to get these on a rush order, say we receive an offer today on your condo and it's conditional until Wednesday, and the buyer is going to want some time with those documents. If they don't have enough time to review them, they will often write into the purchase contract that they have the right to purchase those and charge you for them. So if those documents need to be delivered in an expedited fashion, they often cost even more money. So start collecting them. Not only is it good to present to a buyer when you have an offer, but it will also help you, become an expert on your property and become a better salesperson of your property. You might not have pets, but a buyer's going to come to you and say, I've got 2 Great Danes. Am I allowed to live in this building? And you can very quickly look at the bylaws and find out what the pet restrictions are.
Brilliant. Another question for you, Jeff. What season is best for selling a house? And how much of a difference does it really make?
Yeah, this is a nuanced question because every single year in Alberta, the highest number of closings that we have is May, which means that the highest amount of activity in the marketplace is March and April, because you're going to account for that due diligence period and the time to closing. So the question is that the best time to be on the market? We know that that's when the most homes sell. But if you look at inventory, it's also when the most homes go to market. So the juxtaposition of that is be on the market on December 20th, when very few homes are on the market and any buyers in the market are, they don't have a lot of options. So it's nuanced. I mean, personally, I lean towards when does your property show the best. And I've sold homes in the winter and I felt like I didn't necessarily get max value out of it because, the yard may have been a big selling feature. Yards are very big selling features right now amidst the global pandemic. People want outdoor space. So there's so many things to consider. It really depends on the property type and the current state of the inventory and market.
Yeah, it's funny, when I look at this data, if you just look really simply at the number of new listings that come to market each month, and you look at the number of sales that happen each month, what you see is there's a much bigger variance between the biggest month of new listings and the lowest month of new listings. Bigger variance there than there is between the biggest month of sales and the lowest month of sales. And what that kind of tells me is that people are probably overly focused on listing at the right time because there's way more people trying to list in spring relative to the difference in the number of sales in the springtime. So I for sure think there's going to be more buyers out looking at that time, but I think people probably put too much emphasis on it when you look at the data. Another great question here, Jeff. Is there a list of condo documents that are required somewhere on our website?
Yeah, if you go to the resource center, just search condo documents. It's numbered 1 to 25, and if you have any trouble with that, just drop a line to our help desk through the chat, to my email, text our office line. We'll make sure that you have that information. But yeah, the easiest way is to go to the resource center and just search condo documents.
Great. Another question here. Someone's saying that they're having a hard time finding recently sold comparables for their home. So they're saying that there's not a lot of sold comparables within the last 1 to 3 months. And how relevant is the data beyond that? Once you start going back 6 months or further, is that data still good for people to use?
Yeah, totally. I would go back a year. Go back as far as you need to get relevant comparables, and you can again make that adjustment, right? And you could even use the HPI to do that. So if it takes going back 24 months to find a really dynamite comparable that's a near replica to your property, use that comparable and then make an adjustment. We know that the HPI in the last 24 months, we can see exactly what it's done, and we can say, well, the market for this property type is up 3.8%. And I would go back as far as you need to get really solid comparables.
Brilliant. And probably just time for one more question here, so I'm going to pick this one. And it's a little bit off topic, but someone's asked, how does Bōde help people through the buying process?
Yeah, so what we do is give buyers all of the information and data tools that they need to successfully purchase on their own. And my brother was actually one of the first buyers in the marketplace. And what you can do is expect that if you are self-represented as a buyer, you can typically negotiate a little bit better purchase price, because if you know that if a seller is offering a buy-side commission to a represented buyer, and you show up as a self-represented buyer, that seller no longer needs to pay that fee. So it's kind of expected that both the seller and buyer can gain on that efficiency. So in this example with my brother, it was a $500,000 home, but they were offering a 3.5 and 1.5% commission, which effectively to the seller made that home effectively be listed at $490,000. So essentially what it allows you to do is go forward with a negotiation at a lower list price. And we're starting to see that, on a buy side, buyers aren't seeing a lot of value in agency representation. They're typically doing all their own due diligence. They're searching realtor.ca. They're simply telling their agents which homes they want to see. And, with tools like what we have, it actually allows a more efficient marketplace.
Yeah, I might just add to that. The other great thing about buying through Bōde is we give you, if you want to make an offer on any property, it doesn't have to be listed with Bōde. It can be any property that's listed for sale on realtor.ca. You have the ability to make an offer, and in a really simplified process, we'll put together the contract automatically behind the scenes that gets sent off to the listing agent and the seller. So all of the kind of tools and the paperwork is all taken care of for you on the buy side. And there's no cost to that at all using Bōde. No cost to either the buyer or the seller. But that's all we've got time for today. Unfortunately, not going to be able to get to the other questions. People feel free to get in touch if you'd like to get answers to those. And from my side, just want to say a big thank you for everyone attending, and thanks to Jeff for hosting. And yeah, feel free to reach out with any further questions.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate you joining today. Have a great day.
Bye-bye. Bye.